So in the run, what's going to happen? I mean, we didn't use that graph, but we used like a back-to-back combination. So in the short run, if we accept the immigration, the real wage for that area will decrease. So we have too many labors. So labor inflation, so that decrease, that creates a reduction of the price of the wage, which is plus the labor, which is a wage. So wage will go down like this. Because the U.S. accepted a lot of immigrants from European countries. The new world, which is the U.S., real wage, without immigration is higher than real wage after immigration, right? So that's the short run effect. And regarding the output in the short run, we have this kind of things. So after immigration, both labor, if you have more immigration, the labor in two sectors will both increase. Then that creates a more production of two goods. So from A to B, we have a more and more production of both manufacturing, agricultural goods. In his case, both high-tech and apparel, right? So that should be your answer in the case, in the short run case. What happens to output? PPF will shift because they have more capacity to produce both goods, and output will increase from A to B. So both goods will increase. Yeah? In the long run, this is what they did. So it's different kinds of combination, but we combine these two graphs in different way, so that we had some so-called vector addition, and we could get the same conclusion. And the real wage and real rental rate does not change at all in the long run. Why? Because this capital labor ratio does not change. So they move along the same capital labor line. So capital labor ratio does not change. That's why MPL, MPK does not change. So at the end, real wage, real rental rate, no change in the long run. So everything is adjusted very smoothly in the long run. So no change in economy. In the long run, the output will change like this. This case is the case where this country accepts immigration, right? That means this labor-intensive goods, shoes, production will increase, and capital-intensive goods production, shoes, computers will decrease. So labor will, shoes will increase, and capital, like a computer, will decrease. I was a little bit tricky in today's quiz, right? So I put labor-intensive goods here. A was here and high-tech was here. I mean, to be honest, I didn't mean that way, but I just had like A and H randomly, but it happens to be the case that graph is slightly different. So, yeah. So that means, I mean, it's the same thing. The labor-intensive goods, apparel production increases. So we were here before. So this is apparel and this is high-tech. After this immigration, output of A should increase and output of A should decrease. So point should move somewhere here, right? Not here. Yeah, I mean, I didn't mean it, but I'm sorry if I created a confusion. So PPF will expand. But this is not really clear, so it can expand something like this. Or, I mean, it can be any shape, but as long as your output point is somewhere here, which is this direction. So that should be your correct answer. And maybe there can be one good example of showing you that how this final exam look like. So final exam is based on this quiz question. It's very similar. So your quiz question, don't throw away if I give you this your graded quiz. You should keep that. So that should be your good candidate question for your final exam. And in the final exam, I mean, just the same, very similar to quiz, but sometimes I may change like this, intentionally or unintentionally, like today's case. So, but as long as we understand this concept, then we can draw like a graph accordingly. And I mean, if you got some mistake only in that part, then don't worry too much. I mean, that point is very, very minor. And that's the difference between maybe 0.10 or 9, and that's 1 point is just almost nothing. And any questions on today's quiz? Oh yeah. I'll talk that later on. Yeah, maybe probably. Yeah. It's getting better than the previous quiz. So that's the Ripchinsky theorem, right? So if we have immigration, then if we accept many laborers from foreign countries, then the output of the labor-intensive goods will increase, but the output of capital-intensive goods will decrease. Yeah? That's Ripchinsky theory. And that is the same as the factor price insensitivity result. Even though we have a lot of immigration, the output of labor-intensive goods will increase. So this increased amount of labor is absorbed in this increased output of the industry. So there's no excess demand or excess supply of the laborers. So there's no change of wage or the rental rate. Yeah? So that's called the factor price insensitivity. The factor price, which is a real wage, a real rental rate, does not change after this immigration in the long run. Yeah? And that is one evidence for this Mariel boat case in Cuba. After immigration, so this is something like output. So real value of the output per capita. So we can interpret this as the output. And after immigration in Miami, after they accept a lot of some Cuban immigrants, this Miami trend is decreasing actually, right? But if we compare with other cities' trend, then this trend is higher than this. Before that trend was below, but now this trend is above. That means because they accepted more immigration from Cuba, this output of this industry, which is a labor-intensive industry, increases. On the other hand, output, so this is Miami, this is the other cities, output of capital-intensive goods will decrease. Like this. So that is the evidence of this long-run case, long-run immigration case. I can ask you that, in reverse way, by showing you this graph. Yeah? So does this graph support the short-run or long-run findings of Ripchinsky theorem? Then that is basically based on this long-run, because output of this one industry, labor-intensive industry, increases. Increases means absolutely decreasing, but relatively compared with other cities. Increasing compared with other cities, right? And output of the other goods will decrease, meaning relatively, absolutely or relatively. So that is the evidence for long run case. In the short run, both output will increase. But in the long run, only one output will increase, the other output will decrease. And that is the data for real wage. The percent change in the wage, real wage of workers in education level. I mean, just think that this is like a fixed. It's a capital and land fixed. This is like a short run case, and this is something like a long run. So you can think that this is a short run and long run. In the long run, if you think this overall, after immigration, this real wage will decrease, but real wage does not change. So that is something like a short-run findings. After immigration, we have a lot of some labors. So labor inflation that affects this capital and labor. That affects this industry's real wage. So real wage will decrease. So short-run findings. But this is something like a long-run case. And effect of illegal immigration means similar, but this is a little bit larger than that, but not that different. So that is from the textbook. And that's another research based on like real rental and wages in Singapore. And this is the case of FDI. If you look at the textbook, this is about this FDI. It's same. Like in this vector addition graph, if we move horizontally, that's the case of immigration. If we move this to upward, that's the effect of FDI. Same thing. After FDI, FDI is importing capitals from foreign countries. then output of capital-intensive goods will increase, and output of labor-intensive goods will decrease. Yeah? And you should know how to draw the graph, and by drawing the graph and show that indeed capital-intensive goods will increase, but labor-intensive goods will decrease. And real wage, in the short run, like we have a lot of capital, so value of capital, which is a real rental rate, will decrease in the short run. But in the long run, that effect is very minimal, so there's no effect in the real wage, in real rental rate in the long run. If you look at this case, after Singapore has a FDI, then regardless of time, say 10 years, like 20 years, this real rental rate all went down. And real wage increased a little bit. And does it support the long run case or a short run case? So after having FDI in Singapore, real rental rates actually decreased. The real wage will. The short run. In the long run, the effect should be very minimal, almost a zero. But so there's no specific like number of years. If it's after more than 20 years short run, I mean more than 20 years in long run, it's not like that. So we can't really distinguish. So we can still think that 20 years is not long enough to say the long run. Probably, I mean, this is up to 1990. And if we can do the same research by providing more data set up to 2010, then using those all like 50 years data, then if the real rental rate is almost zero, then that can be a very good finding. So that can be publishable quality. And how can we measure those real rental? That is also an interesting case. So whenever we look at this, some data from research, then we should be always interested in how to calculate or how to measure those things. If we review microeconomics a little bit, we already did before. Your wage is price times MPL. Do you remember this? Yeah? So it's from chapter 3, 4, 5, everywhere. So if you produce some extra amount of output, and each good is some amount of dollars or thing, then this is something that you produce, and you should receive at least this amount of money in some company, right? That's your wage. And if we change this, move P here, that is MPL, right? And what is this? Real wage, right? So we discussed this also. So your real wage is basically same as this productivity. So we want to get this one, then we can simply calculate this one. And there's like some data of some number of workers or something, and how many products they have. And also we have some data for capital and K. Then this is R over P. Right? So by assuming that, how can we get this real rental and real wage? And we simply calculate this NPL and NPK of that country. Okay? So they're the same thing. And what is the important part here is that this. So this is a real rental and real wage, but basically that is based on MPK and MPL. And this is somewhere in between, some weighted average, some kind of average between these two numbers. And when we say real rental and real wage, we mean by a marginal productivity of labor and capital. So that's basically productivity. Yeah? When you say real rental, real wages, so that is productivity. After this country accepted a lot of some capital, after this country has FDI, productivity of this country is negative based on this study. So that means if you study the macroeconomics, then the first one that you're going to look at is the growth model. And Solow model is the famous growth model. And according to the Solow model, in order to have a long-run sustainable economic growth, so which is the kind of a goal of each country, we want like a long-run sustainable growth.
then productivity is a very important issue. Otherwise, this all this kind of growth can be only based on short-term capital accumulation. Then without having this long-run productivity growth, then we cannot have these sustainable things. So in order to analyze whether FDI is effective or not, then we should have the case that after we have FDI, this productivity should increase. So that's a good thing for that country. That's why we want to accept some FDI. Right? Why we are having more and more foreign capital? Because we want to have more growth. We want to increase our productivity. But based on that study, Singapore's productivity has not increased, actually decreased, even though they have FDI. So they concluded that the FDI in Singapore is not really effective. But Singapore experienced a rapid economic growth for the past some decades, but that is not based on FDI, according to that study, based on some other things, some open trade policies and something, but not at least not by the FDI. But if we look at this, so this is from different study, different persons have a different research, then they have a different methodology of measuring this productivity, but they have a positive things. So they argued that the FDI was effective in Singapore's case, but this person is arguing that it's not effective. I mean, if you look at this many economists paper, I mean, they use a similar data set, but sometimes they arrive at totally different results. This is based on how they analyze data, what kind of methodology they used, and based on small difference, then we can have a totally different result. So we don't know actually. I mean, whether FDI was very important or not. This is a very important issue, but in social science, there's no a real kind of answers. It's not like a natural science. But, so FDI and economic growth, that's very important issues, right? And there's so many studies. If you Google in the Google Scholar, if you Google FDI and growth, then probably you can see so many researches, so many papers. But there's no shortcut answers. Sometimes FDI was positively affected by economic growth, sometimes negatively, sometimes no relationship, and yeah. And the one kind of dangerous thing about the analyzing this relationship between FDI and economic growth is that FDI, so we can have a hypothesis. If we have more and more FDI, that affects positively to that country's economic growth. But when we have, if you're investors, if you want to invest huge amount of capital to country X, you do not randomly assign some capitals. You study very carefully whether that country has a potential to grow. That means it's not like a FDI increases, then growth increases. But because that country is growing, you want to provide more FDI. So we have a kind of a reverse, this causality problem. So in running this kind of regression or econometrics, that is very huge problems. And so because of many different issues, like this FDI and growth, even though it's very interesting, but so no single answers and not very easy to analyze. Based on that result, right? And even though this country, Singapore, like a booming economy, have a FDI, they didn't have as a productivity growth. So that's why this is simply myth. Yeah? So according to, so that's related with this myth of East Asia's miracle. Like East Asia experienced very rapidly, like South Korea, Taiwan, Hong Kong, Singapore. They are so-called four tigers. Yeah, that's what this World Bank publication in 1993. They published one book called East Asian Miracle. That's the title. Yeah? And according to that book, their growth is amazing, and it's all about some good thing about their rapid growth. And somebody like Paul Krugman said that is the myth, because that the high growth of Asian economy is similar to the growth of Soviet Union in the 1950s and 60s, which was due to a simple capital accumulation. So they accepted a lot of capital, but capital accumulation did not create this productivity growth, which is the main factor for long-run sustainable growth. That's why, so based on...
So there should be a regression? regression after.
Yeah. So that theory was very popular. So he kind of argued this kind of thing right after this financial crisis, 1997. So in South Korea, I mean, very like gloomy. I was college student there, and my senior, I mean, before like 1997, it was not a big problem to get a job. I mean, it depends on what kind of job they want, but if they want to get a job, then they could find it. But it's totally different after 1997, and so whole country was very gloomy, and this person argued these kind of things, and many people hated that argument. But anyway, I mean, so he kind of argued the Asian economies growth will be short run and no more growth after this 1997, but partially true, partially wrong, because after 1997, the growth rate of South Korea, for example, decreased dramatically. So before then, like 8%, 9%, sometimes in 1980s, like a double digit, but these days, like 3% and 2%. But this is also based on the solo model. It's quite natural things. After we have like a long jump in the Olympic, we have like a jump. Right? They cannot jump forever. After once they reach some threshold, I mean, will go down. So this is called a steady state of economic growth. The economy cannot grow forever, and after they have some period of a rapid growth, then economy will slow down. I mean, Japan in the 1950s, 60s, like a huge growth, but these days, almost zero. But that's not bad. These are natural things. Yeah. Right. And now it's time for China to grow very rapidly, like 10% something. But I mean, their growth will not be forever. So each country, I mean, that's kind of some natural things.
And what is the merit for long run and short run? Is it decade or several decades?
That's also like a very controversial. Some people say it's decades or double decades, or some people say never comes, or so that's the social science. We have a theory, but it's not really 100% true. So that's it about chapter 5, and this is something, I mean, just for fun, like how important this immigration is. Sometimes for some countries, there's a remittance. Like after you work, suppose you work here, and then if you're from some foreign country, if you send money to your country, that's a remittance, and that is sometimes more than this net ADA, the ODA they receive. So yeah, some countries this immigration is a big impact on domestic economy, and like this is also from just for fun, and like you are interested, yeah. Right. So that's also one case that can be discussed in this chapter. Instead of having more and more immigration, we have like more and more out migration, particularly some high skilled laborers. For some countries, like this brain drain is very similar. It's a very serious problem. Because 47% of Ghana's college graduate is living foreign country, not their country, but other countries. And 98, I don't know whether it's true or not, but it's from some websites. Yeah. Anyway, for some countries, this brain drain is a very serious problem. If you're educated, then they don't come back to their country. So somebody like Professor Bhagwati from Columbia University, I mean, he's very famous in international trade, and he suggested imposing tax. If you're high-skilled labor, and if you're living in foreign country, then you need to pay tax to your country. But if you're living in foreign country, that means your country has no way to collect the money, right? So the government cannot go to that country to pick you up. Right. So even though the idea is nice, but yeah. Right. Yeah. And this is also for fun, and like a moving cost of illegal immigration. I don't know how to get this kind of data, but if you want to go to the U.S. illegally, that's important. From Mexico, it's pretty cheap because you can just yeah. But if you go from China, but illegally, then yeah, I don't know how to calculate this money, but and so something like this. Yeah? So I encourage you to immigrate. I mean, immigration means not just means living in foreign country forever. I mean, if you just work for a few years at least, yes, why not? Yeah? So, but don't do that illegally. You know? Yeah.